Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading The Golden Goblet, and I'm beginning chapter 8. All through the spring, while the heat swelled and the river shrank, Rifer and Hequet met as often as they were able at midday or in the evening after their day's work was done. Frequently, the ancient joined them, bringing Nelumbo nuts and his cackling laugh and his sly, wise teasing. One morning, after a great many delays, Hequet was finally instructed in beading at the gold house. That evening he told Rifer all about it. "It is easy. You could do it any time you liked if only you had the tools. Now, do you remember that charcoal block with the tiny round depressions in it? Rake always keeps it next to the furnace on that storage shelf." I remember it. Well, you simply melt scraps of metal in those little hollows. I used the sweep for it today. When the puddles turn the right color, then you take the block from the fire, and in a minute you turn the beads out. Then you boil them in pickle and wash them in water, and there they are, ready to be soldered to whatever you like. Rake is using them for the bracelet now. He's making one for the judge's lady. And there's another way to make them too. You make little rings by winding the wire about a straight, thin rod and then clipping each twist. Links. I learned long ago to make links. Very well. Then you make links and you pack some of them on a layer of finely broken charcoal in a clay box. Then you cover those with another layer of charcoal bits. Then you put in more links. You keep it up until the box is full. Then you wire the lid on, heat it until the box and wire are redder than the fire. When you shake the charcoal out, by Ammon, it is surprising. The links have all turned to little round grains. Now, the first way sounds quicker. But the second is more fun. Hequet grinned, said the rat as he walked past the cheese and robbed the trap. I will admit it's sure to use the charcoal block where you can see the gold melt. I had to try twice before I got the box to the right shade of red. The first time I opened it, it still had links, and Sata cuffed me all over the shop. I've no doubt you could do it, though, if you had the chance to try. Someday I will, Rifer said, but he looked at his gritty hands, rough from a day's sandstoning, adorning with one of the ever-present bandages, and wondered dismally if that day would ever come. He wondered more and more as the spring progressed and nothing changed in his life except the Gaboo was sometimes in a good mood and sometimes in a bad. It was beginning to seem to him that he had only dreamed once of gold working, of learning from his father, of working about Rake's shop and making the little leaves, and that now he was awake once and for all to a world of dreary stone. Hequet continued to describe every process he was taught at the gold house, but the more interesting the processes, the more complicated they were, and the harder they were to describe. Besides, it was not long before Rifer realized he could never increase his skills merely by listening to Hequet's earnest explanations. It was practice he required, not just information. I cannot learn these things, he told Hequet finally one day. Not this way, it's useless. Could you shape a bowl if someone merely told you how to do it? Nay, not until you held the hammer in your hand and learned the sound it must make and the way the stake must ring. Let us give it up, Hequet. It only makes me hate stone cutting more than I do already. The ancient, who was sitting beside him cracking the Nelumbo nuts, glanced up at him. Why is it you hate stonework so, young one? It's a good trade. A good trade? Rifer exclaimed scornfully. It's a clod's trade. It is a trade that spoils a man's hands and makes him a dullard and nearly breaks his back every day. And he went on until he was out of breath while the old man listened in silence, cracking his nuts and nodding patiently now and then. Very well, the ancient said when Rifer had finished at last. It is a clod's trade and you hate it. But it is a trade, young one. A man can earn his living by it, and not too poor a living either. Now he paused carefully, removed the bitter leaf from the lobes of a nut with his knobby old hands, and handed the kernels to Hequet. I never learned a trade at all. He lifted his one bright eye and looked directly at Rifer. My father was a cattle drover in Lower Egypt, and I helped him. He wandered here and there, and when he died and went to the gods, may his 3,000 years be full of joy, another drover took his place, and I had to wander alone. I came here at last and worked on the docks while I was young enough and strong enough. But how I used to envy those who knew a craft and went each day to a shop and took home their coppers safe and sure each night, and went again in the morning instead of having to wonder if you would be hired today. Hi, remember, young one, you will be an old one too someday, though it is hard for you to think of it now. And it is not good to be an old one without a trade. If it is stone cutting instead of gold working, that's a pity, but learn it well anyway while you have the chance. But you, Rifer faltered, I thought you have a donkey in the little house on the edge of the desert. I do not complain, the ancient said, smiling, but I've not always had them. I know what I speak of, boy, and though you may think me a dismal old crow, you do well to heed my cawing. No doubt he's right, Rifer told himself as he walked back to the shop. But he had no heart for trying to become a good stone cutter or for taking notice of anything in the shop beyond what he was forced to learn. One day, a day of glaring, shimmering heat when one's skin drew tight from dryness and even seemed likely to crack into crazily spreading wounds as all the fields had cracked. Hequet appeared at the thicket in a state of great excitement. Rifer, he panted, flinging himself down upon the matted rushes beside his friends. Tomorrow Rake is sending me to the workshop of Zau the master to fetch a stake. He did not say I must go alone. Do you want to go with me? But I cannot. Rifer was stammering with the force of his wanting to go. I will be all day at the stone shop. Oh, I am to go at the day's end after the work is done. Then I can, unless Pi delays me with some stupid task. He must not. I will stay out of his sight and slip away when the first man lays down his tool. How did it happen? What sort of stake are you to fetch? One of Zau's great designs, which he uses in some way for the golden masks he makes to fit over the faces of the great ones when they go to their tombs. The stake has cracked, and he is ordering a new one made. He has given Rake leave to take the old one and have it copied for his own work. Oh, he is generous as well as great. Rake is a kinsman of his brother's wife. You will meet me then, perhaps at the big tree by Abba the potter's. Then we can go together. Zau's shop is near the palace. Oh, I know I'll be there. My thanks, friend. The next day dragged even more slowly than usual. With this prospect glittering at its end, Rifer nicked his hand twice with a carelessly placed chisel as visions of the wonderful objects he would see in Zau's shop danced through his mind. I will speak to Zau again, really speak to him. Face to face, he kept thinking. He will ask me how I fare, and I will tell him everything. Only little by little, as he asks. I must not pour it all out like some imbecile and make him think I ask for pity. Ammon forbid it. I will answer his questions only and be modest and proud like my father. But he will find it out, all about Gaboo and the gold stealing, and that I was taken from Rakes and forced to work here among these cursed blocks of stone. And then he will frown and say that it's an evil thing, a slap in the faces of the gods, that the son of Thutra, the goldsmith, should be a stone cutter's apprentice. Aye, and he will remember that he once saw my little cups and armbands, and that they showed skill, very unusual skill, and he will grow very stern at the thought of my hands being ruined and my days wasted, and he will go straight to Gaboo and tell him he must release me so that I can come and be his pupil. Rifer's thoughts slowed uneasily. then stopped. Daydreams had lost some of their old power. These days, reality kept creeping in and ruining things with stony facts. He could not persuade himself, even in fancy, that Goblet would care a copper what Zhao thought or said, nor could he see himself speaking of the thieving, nor could he see any way to become Zhao's pupil, however warm the possible invitation, without a place to live and a way to earn his fee. The donkey. Zhao would not present him with a donkey any more than Goblet would. Catching sight of Pai striding toward him with his jaw upthrust and a stick lifted, Rifer bent hastily to his work. No matter, he told himself, I shall see Zhao again and speak a little with him and see things he has made. Perhaps I may even get to watch him work a little. It is enough, is it not? Yesterday brought no such gift from the gods, nor will tomorrow. He was waiting at Abba the potter's late that afternoon when Hequet came running down the dusty street. They started at once for Zhao's house, talking excitedly as they threaded their way through the press of home-going Thebans. The parched and wounded earth was rosy with the sun's dying, and the Nile, shrunk to a red-brown trickle in its season of death, looked exactly like what Rifer knew it was, the last feeble flowing of blood from the body of the beloved murdered god Osiris. The nearer they drew to the palace, the thinner the crowds became, and when they turned away from the river into the street of the carpenters, they found the street almost deserted, with the shops closed for the night. We must find a turning somewhere near here, Hequet said. Zhao lives on the street of good fortune. I know. You have been there before? With your father, perhaps? Aye, but it was a long ago. I remember little. I think it has a very high walls with a purple vine tumbling over them near the gate and treetops showing behind. Nay, I am not sure about the trees, but I know the design worked into the grille of the gate. It is a straining vat and cloth, the sign for gold. Hequet turned large eyes upon him. You can read? Like a scribe? Nay, I learned a little, but when my father lived among men, look here. It is a turning. Aye, it is the right one. Rake said there would be a wine shop on one side and a tall palm opposite. Their footsteps quickened as they left the rows of carpenter shops and entered the other street. It was almost another world. There were high walls on the side with tops of palms and acacias showing above them. There was no dust, much quiet, and a pervading fragrance of flowers and wealth. Here lived Pharaoh's favorites among the artisans. Farther along beyond their comparatively modest houses, the street broadened and the grand villas of judges and officials rose on either side of the midst of the large garden and vineyards. At the extreme end of the street, like the dazzling tip on an arrow, the two boys could see the corner of the palace walls, stained pink by the sunset. Here it is, Hequet exclaimed, pointing. High walls with a purple vine. But there are other purple vines, he said uncertainly. They walked to the gate and found the gold sign worked in its grill. It is the one, Rifer whispered. Then we open the gate and go in. That's what Rake said. And we'll stop here for now and continue the next time. Bye-bye.